Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May is in Brussels and she's been meeting with the 27 other European leaders for the first time since the general election. She won't be doing any negotiating today, but all eyes will be on what effect her weakened position at home will have on her status abroad. Today, the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, said he dreams of getting Britain to stay in the EU, as our political editor Laura Koonsberg reports.
No victory lap, no majority, no expectation of an easy ride. As she comes here with plans for EU citizens, here and at home.
How can you carry on with your version of Brexit when the mandate that you desire to strengthen is actually weakened?
I'm very pleased to be here at the European Council today following the constructive start of our negotiations for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. What I'm going to be setting out today is clearly how the United Kingdom proposes to protect the rights of EU citizens living in the UK and see the rights of UK citizens living in Europe protected.
Both sides say they want to be generous. EU citizens already in Britain will be allowed to stay. Yet a lot more will be said across the table before there's anything like a detailed deal.
Welcome to Brussels.
And the uncertainty after the election has allowed some EU enthusiasts to ponder if Brexit will really happen, with a little help from his friends.
The European Union was built on dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. So, who knows? You may say, I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one.
In this political circus, with its stalwarts and rising stars, all must parade, if not wink, for the waiting cameras. There is no serious expectation that Britain will change its mind, but some may sniff more of a chance of getting the UK to listen.
I hate Brexit from every angle. My dream would be that in this Brexit process we would come to a sort of end state, or maybe an intermediate end state for the coming years, in which the United Kingdom would stay connected to the internal market.
For me, the priority is shaping the future of the 27 countries. That comes before Brexit.
Remember, just leaving the European Union easy like that, just finger click. They took 9 months to write a letter to tell us that they want to trigger Article 50. We see the situation now, so what was so easy and without consequences is not the right story, so we are waiting now.
The Prime Minister asked for your votes to give her more power among these leaders as well as more influence at home. But that's backfired so badly, they can't even be sure as they get down to business that she'll be the one to see the deal through.
Commiserations, perhaps, among those few who put themselves to the public test. But Theresa May's pain in this moment could be just a taste of what's ahead.
And despite the turmoil at home, the government is trying to crack on with this process. In the last 48 hours, the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, has been to Italy, Spain, Poland and Latvia as a warm-up act. Tonight at dinner, Theresa May will present her broad proposals for what happens to those millions of EU citizens who live in Britain and of Brits abroad who live in other European countries. Now, all along, Theresa May has said she wants to make a generous offer. I understand that no European Union citizen currently living in Britain will be asked to leave. But beyond that, there are going to be at least 3 big clashes over the detail. The first of all, when will the new rules apply? What will be the cut-off date? Second, who will it affect? It's one thing talking about European citizens. What about the rest of their families? And third of all, who will be in charge? In this building, the Brussels establishment is adamant it must be the European courts in charge of this new system. For the British government, it's always been a red line that only British courts can do the business. And remember, George, this is only one of the first aspects in all of these complicated negotiations that lie ahead.
Laura, thank you.
Now, 2 weeks after a general election that was supposed to make her stronger in Europe, Theresa May is in Brussels, a diminished figure amongst EU leaders. The election result has left some of them admitting to dreams that Brexit could now be reversed, despite the start of negotiations on Monday. This evening, after dinner, Theresa May is presenting what she says will be a generous offer on the rights of EU citizens in the UK. She'll then have to leave the room whilst the other leaders discuss it behind her back. Here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
Europe's golden boy, the new French president, at the centre of everything. One starstruck Prime Minister couldn't concentrate on his media interviews when he saw Emmanuel Macron in the flesh. EU leaders believe his coming could be the turning point for a project that endured crisis after crisis, culminating in last year's British referendum vote. Here they see Theresa May's disastrous snap election as a rejection of her Brexit plans. Some even talk wistfully of Britain seeing the error of its ways altogether.
British friends have even asked me whether Brexit could be reversed. I told them that, in fact, the European Union was built on dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. So, who knows? You may say I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one.
The Dutch Prime Minister said, listening to the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, he felt Britain might go for a Norway-style, much closer relationship with Europe than Theresa May's original plan.
I think if there is a continued link to the internal market and to the customs union in one form or another, including accepting that it also means the court in Luxembourg, the four freedoms, if we could come to something like that, I'm hopeful. But it all depends, of course, on what Theresa May and her team will decide.
Does she look like she could last in office after that election?
I think this is a UK decision and the Cabinet's decision and a Tory's decision. I'm not in charge of that, but what is important is to give clarification and to have someone we can trust and we can have also predictability.
Does Theresa May look stronger or weaker to you as she comes to these talks?
Well, we will hear her opinion in the evening about the situation, and I know that she has a proposal also for us.
The proposal Theresa May will present after dinner tonight is her opening offer on what should happen after Brexit for EU citizens who live in the UK. She's calling it a big and generous offer. Everyone here expects it to be nothing like as generous as what the EU 27 have said they want.
What I'm going to be setting out today is clearly how the United Kingdom proposes to protect the rights of EU citizens living in the UK and see the rights of UK citizens living in Europe protected. That's been an important issue. We've wanted it to be one of the early issues that was considered in the negotiations. That is now the case. That work is starting. We will be setting out how we propose to ensure that EU citizens living in the UK have their rights protected in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Theresa May will explain Britain's proposals when she speaks for about 10 minutes or so in about a couple of hours' time. Well, as you were saying, Matt, Theresa May is not going to get very strong indications of how her plan for EU citizens who are in the UK is actually going down, because she's being told to leave the room the moment she's made her 10-minute presentation. What's going to happen then is that the EU 27, as it happens, are then going to start scrabbling over a couple of EU bodies that are currently based in London, and which various leaders in the room are trying to grab for their own countries. Theresa May is, I think, pretty clearly not going to present something that is a perfect match for the existing EU plan for EU citizens who are in the UK. There'll be a gap between the two. You can bet your bottom euro on that, but we don't know the full details yet, and they won't actually get the full details in there. The full details come on Monday when Theresa May goes to the House of Commons to make a statement. They'll be published then, and these moments were meant to be, after the election that she thought was going to deliver a landslide, not exactly harmless moments, but not painful. In fact, it is yet another moment when Theresa May will be tested, judged and scored by her own MPs. And they will be looking for guarantees that whatever it is she's come up with is not going to allow a flood, as some of them might see it, of immigration. And when it comes to moments like this, she doesn't always score highly.
Thanks, Gary. Like the Trumpian type.
Emily, hello from the Justus Lipsius building here in Brussels. Behind me, the good folks of the media excitedly working on their stories from the European Council meeting underway here. Now, this is the first time Theresa May has met all her counterparts since the election. And to think that was just 2 weeks ago. Back then, we thought she'd be here with a strong personal mandate and voter backing for her version of Brexit. Had that outcome pertained, Britain would certainly have had a leader with unassailable authority to negotiate and sign cheques on our behalf. But now she finds herself a minority leader, coping with the Grenfell crisis at home, with a parliament unkeen on her vision of Brexit and a nation utterly divided on how to proceed. So it wasn't her strutting in with a big mandate, but Emmanuel Macron of France, the new hero of the European establishment. It's been a big day here. Tonight, Mrs May told the others her proposals for EU citizens in the UK post-Brexit. It's one step in the exit negotiation. Our diplomatic editor Mark Urban is with me. Mark, just about this offer that broke tonight on UK citizens and their rights, EU citizens and their rights.
Theresa May hoping to regain the initiative in this process with this offer. Broadly, here it is. The 3 million EU citizens in the UK at the moment can all remain. Through a 5-year naturalisation process, they can in fact have all the same rights as other UK citizens, whether that's education-wise or medically speaking, whatever. The second point is you could still arrive and start that 5-year clock. It gave a cut-off date somewhere between the Article 50 declaration and the end of this process in 2019. And obviously, well, we're already some months into that, and it's subject to negotiation. So it could still be possible to arrive and start that 5-year process as an EU citizen. Lastly, a streamlining of the process for naturalisation. Some people from EU countries have complained about that, 85 pages. The UK government has promised to look again and make that simpler. So that's the package in effect.
Right. And the Europeans not giving us a lot of reaction to it because they don't want to get into a negotiation about that here, do they? I mean, that's not going to happen.
No. I mean, look...
that's Barnier's job.
Look, the fascinating thing about this summit is just how awkward it all is. You've got one leader, you've got 28 arriving, then one has to leave at a certain point. I mean, we already knew that was happening at a couple of previous meetings, but it's so awkward. And now that these concrete proposals are being made, the EU is standing on its formal position of saying, no, the negotiation is done through Michel Barnier and David Davis. That's where this conversation will resume next week. You know, they won't give her any sort of proper reaction to her proposed package. A whole second level of awkwardness, of course, because of the outcome of the UK general election, where people see her weakened. They see things happening like Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, this morning, opening up all sorts of possibilities, talking about a 3 or 4 year transitional period. So maybe past the date of a future UK election, before UK citizens actually really know what the trading terms of the new relationship will be. And under what terms would we carry on during those 3 or 4 years, added on to the Article 52 years, all sorts of things. And of course that has led people here to be more vocal, if you like, and open things up to debate. It's never been easy getting the 28 to move in the same direction. Now 27 are learning that there's something even harder, managing the departure of a nation from this place and its myriad rules. Theresa May arrived, post-election a wounded antelope, to use a phrase coined by a Tory colleague, but hoping to regain the initiative.
We will be setting out how we propose to ensure that EU citizens living in the UK have their rights protected in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Hearing the different views emerging from within Theresa May's cabinet, many of the European leaders arriving here are discarding the usual protocol of not commenting on another state's affairs and giving their own version of what they think Brexit should look like.
And I think if there is a continued link to the internal market and to the customs union in one form or another, including accepting that it also means the court in Luxembourg, the 4 freedoms, if we could come to something like that, I'm hopeful.
And reminding everyone of the wider interest, Europe's most powerful leader.
For me, the future of the EU27 takes precedence over negotiating the UK's exit from the EU.
That spread of attitudes from let's make Brexit as soft as possible to will you just get on with it runs through Europe's geographic and ideological axes. But they have been able to rally around their early priorities for negotiations, and at the top of those, the rights of EU citizens living in the UK.
I believe it is outrageous the way the government treats the people being in this situation. I mean, EU nationals residing or working in UK. And I'm saying this because all these people, they don't know if they will still have the right to continue their life and work in UK. So they need answers. They need rules, they need clarity, predictability, and I would add a bit of sensitivity.
In an attempt to answer that anger and move on the talks, Theresa May arrived bearing an offer on EU citizens, relating to UK citizens in EU countries too. But given the strength of European views, they won't yield much, particularly in the transitional phase of Brexit, expected to last years.
You want a lot of things which are impossible without accepting the European Court of Justice jurisdiction. The whole transition period, which is practically the extension of what we call acquis communautaire here in Brussels, which is simply the European Union law, the directives, the regulations. This is all under the supervision of the European Court of Justice. And if you want to maintain the certain rights for the citizens and you want to have a transition period also that would allow you to continue maybe also with some other rights, then we cannot accept that there is no European Court of Justice, because the European Court of Justice is the only court that we accept having the right to interpret European law.
There are plenty in Brussels who've become more pessimistic post-UK election about finding a way through Brexit. But speaking for the 27 governments, the Council President tried to inject some optimism today.
The European Union was built on dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. So, who knows? You may say, I am a dreamer, but I am not the only one.
Having made her citizens' rights pitch tonight to the 27, Theresa May trudged out of the summit, leaving the others to chew it over without her. Their response will come via negotiator Michel Barnier, a measure of the EU's determination to stick to its own rules of the road.
Mark Urban out and about in Brussels today. Look, a phrase that has been habitually adopted by politicians of all colours in the last few months in answer to any question at all, Brexit or not, is, I've been quite clear on this. Theresa May used it a lot, and you have to say she was clear about Brexit in her Lancaster House speech earlier this year, but things are not so clear now, at least not to some Europeans. Earlier today I spoke to Antonio Tajani. He's the Italian serving as President of the European Parliament. He's not a Brexit negotiator as such, however he is a player in all of this, as the Parliament has to approve any deal. And I asked him if the negotiation had changed given the UK election result.
We will have the separation between London and Brussels, and we need to achieve an agreement on the framework before the end 2018. And then we need to start for an agreement for the day after. I think after the British elections, the situation for hard Brexit, in my opinion, is going down. And for this, now it's important to be pragmatic. As I said from the beginning, it's important now to work also for paving the way for the day after.
And we start that now. We need to start thinking about that.
Exactly. The negotiations are starting, but we need to work for the future also. Because the UK will leave the European Union, but not Europe. And we need to cooperate in the future against terrorism, against illegal immigration, also on defence sector, because the UK is member of NATO.
But trade as well, and you're happy to start those talks fairly quickly now, not waiting till the end of next year, but to start thinking about the future relationship pretty quickly.
No, we need to, before to decide the framework of the separation. First step. Second step, after the agreement on the framework, it's possible to start for an agreement for the future. In my opinion, it is possible to achieve the goal before end of 2018.
But the separation end of next year,
Exactly.
That means we don't start talking about the future relationship until the end of next year.
For us, it's important before to decide the separation. Yeah. And after the separation, it's possible to speak on the day after the separation.
Do you feel Britain knows what it wants now? I mean, obviously we had an election that was indecisive in some ways. Does Britain know what it wants?
But I think I don't know what the British want. Probably they are against the Brussels bureaucracy. A lot of progress, a lot of rules, the power in the European Commission, a lot of people working, civil servants working, imposing rules. But I don't know if the British know very well the situation the day after, without internal market.
A lot of people are talking about transitional arrangements. I mean, how long do you think transitional arrangements have to run for? 2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
No. Short of the European Parliament proposal, a short term for the transition period. Not
short term, what's that?
3 years, not more.
3 years, not more than 3 years. Do you feel you know what Britain's negotiating position is on single market, on customs union? Because
it's not our job. It's not our job. It's a British job. The UK want to leave the European Union. It's not the European Union against the UK. If they want to leave, the implementation of Article 15, what they want? They want to leave the European Union. They want a model as Norway, as Switzerland, or they want to leave and nothing more. This is not our job. This is the problem for the UK. Yeah. And I don't know after the many elections, after the referendum, really what the British want to do on this. For me, it's important to achieve agreement. I am optimistic, finally. We will have an agreement.
The problem, in a way, at the moment is we don't have a consensus about staying in. Okay, so staying in the EU, impossible, because there's no consensus on that. And we don't have a consensus on any one model.
Nobody knows. No, yeah. It's possible to change.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you say that. But there's no consensus on any model outside the EU. Is there a plausible halfway house?
The problem is what Mrs. May and what the UK government want to do. They want to leave Europe and nothing more, or they want to have a closer cooperation in the next year. For example, as I said, an example is the cooperation between Europe and Norway. It's a good example, but nobody knows. Before the election, the elections, the May position was very strong. Now, I think in the UK, the situation, the opinion is more flexible, my point of view. But we need, during the negotiation, it's possible to combine it, to decide. I think we don't have a final position of the UK. If the UK want to achieve another agreement, it's possible to do it, but we need to ask the European Union. We want to stay in agreement as Switzerland or as Norway. This is possible to do.
It's possible.
But in my opinion, it's possible to do, but it's possible to decide on this after a negotiation. For this, I think, it's important to know the real position of the UK.
President Tajani, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, at times, talking to him, he sounded like a man who's trying to scare Britain. But in fairness, the idea that Brexit is scary for us and for them is the sincerely held view of most people here. Let's find out what my guests think now. Tom Nuttall, who writes the Charlemagne column in The Economist, and Verena Schmidt-Rushman, Brussels bureau chief at the German press agency, DPA. Very good evening to you both. Look, it seems like today lots of people have been saying you can change your mind. Verena, do they think we might change our mind? What are they doing?
I don't think they are very serious about that. I think there might be some hope that the Brits might actually come to the senses, because there isn't a clear notion that Brexit might be a good thing. So the general line in the EU is, think about it. It's really, there's going to be a negative impact. Think about it again.
You really might want to think about it, but we're not necessarily expecting you to. Tom, it seems to have got inordinately more complex since the election, because the original Theresa May Brexit had a certain simplicity to it. I mean, do they feel that as well?
Absolutely. I think they were rather dismayed by the result of this election because previously we knew what Britain wanted. It wanted to leave the single market, it wanted to leave the customs union, and we were on course for what is generally known as a hard Brexit. Now the whole process is shrouded in some sort of uncertainty. Will there be another election? Will they still be negotiating with Theresa May and David Davis in 6 months' time, in a year's time? Will British policy on leaving the European Union remain the same? So all of a sudden, what they had hoped would be a very stable, orderly, discreet process now looks rather uncertain.
To you, Verena, does it feel like Britain is using up goodwill, that it's burning through its credits of goodwill?
I don't think so, no. It's, I think the EU side has sort of settled on the notion that, you know, we want to get on with it and we want to eventually get it over with. And so I think that's the main feeling, to sort of start an orderly process and you know, check off different things. And
do you think we'll be able to divide the 27? I mean, they've been quite united. You can't get them to talk about anything without Michel Barnier's say-so.
For the moment, I think they do seem pretty unified, and I personally wouldn't waste my time on it, because it's, I mean, that there might be some kind of crack, some kind of option, but as I said, I think that the main interest is to really get on with it, and for the EU has an interest to leave the whole story behind and get on with their own future.
Yeah. Tom, where does this go, do you think? Because it feels like it would be just rather difficult to sort of have a different kind of Brexit at the moment, and yet it feels like we haven't really quite settled on one.
It's very, very hard to say. It's all about what happens in British politics now. I mean, we had the negotiation formally began earlier this week when David Davis turned up here in Brussels and sat down with Michel Barnier, and they probed each other's positions on the divorce issues, the money, the citizens' rights, the Irish issue, and those negotiations will really start to get into the nitty-gritty now that we have in particular this offer from the British government on citizens' rights. So as far as the European side is concerned, they will proceed on the basis of what they hear from Britain. But of course, what they hear from Britain, if there's another election, if Theresa May is overthrown, if, you know, who knows what happens, could change. And in that point, we get into a very complicated situation, because the European Union has created a negotiating stance on the basis of what it has heard from Britain so far.
OK, we better leave it there. Verena, Tom, thanks both
Thank you
very much. If anyone voted for Brexit because they were tired of hearing complex news from a remote Brussels, I fear the next 18 months might be a disappointment. I think we'll be back here regularly. Better sign up for some loyalty points at Brussels hotels.